Welcome everyone to today's episode. Monica and I are super excited to talk about leadership today. And we tend to talk about leadership not so much at a geopolitical level, because everyone's an expert at that. No, we tend to talk about leadership at the corporate level, at the organizational level. And we also have locus, in that sphere, because both of us have been corporate leaders. Now, it's important, I think, when we talk about leadership in this context, to understand that we seem to be going through a bit of a crisis. There seems to be a sense of an outgoing style of leadership with not a very clear sense of what's replacing it.
Well said.
And therefore, what we thought we'd do today is really to talk about the shape of this crisis, to talk about, whether, this is a lack of skill or a lack of will, or, has, God forbid, AI taken over the need for any kind of human leadership at all, which I know can as the case.
Yeah, I don't think about
I
it.
don't think that at all. I don't think it ever be there.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, no, I personally don't believe leadership is a skill that you can delegate. Certainly not to some kind of artificial agent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we come to the skills part, of course we do, but we come to that by way of talking about the circumstances that have changed and possibly what beliefs have changed along with it. And so, is there a way to sort of think about what boggy ground am I stepping on and how do I keep my balance?
Sure. Boggy down. I like that. Okay. So, what in your mind is this boggy ground that we are stepping in?
Sure. So you said this very nicely a little earlier, which is that there's an old system that has been yanked out before a new system could fully come in and be bedded in. So what are these systems? Earlier, the system or the path to leadership was that I do something very well over a period of time. I demonstrate competence, loyalty. There is enough time given to me to get things wrong and then get them right and then bring them up to the level of an artist. And I'm rewarded for all of that and rewarded for bringing value by way of either saving or making the organization money. So that script is flipped to I have a great idea, I know how to pitch it. I have access via alum networks or whatever to people I can pitch it to and access money. And I have the tech capability to make that happen.
Nice different. We might, and one day it's possible that we have a disagreement here. You're not hypothesizing that earlier leadership was better.
Oh no.
Okay,
No.
I'm glad you put that straight.
No, Rani. We both had reams of data as to bad leadership, bad practices altogether, and some of those are now for the better. It's like smallpox. It's eradicator almost, right? So yeah. So I'm not saying that at all. Just that the systems have shifted, and that's the boggy ground. So circumstances have changed. I don't know if we've figured out what needs to replace what used to be, and that's the gap that we need to address.
So, how do you want to do this?
Let's jump in with a little Harry Potter,
Okay.
right? Um, so I remember this quote from Harry Potter where,
Unbelievably leadership.
yes, that one is, yeah, it's bothered me, and so I mean, I'm leading in with the word. There you go. So where Dumbledore tells Harry Potter that in my experience, some of the best leaders are those on whom leadership is thrust upon and they don't seek it, and to their own surprise, they find that they lead well or something to that effect. And in my experience, I've found people they pushed into those roles of leadership, then even holding that space very well for a long time, and then the first chance they get to exit, they exit the responsibility quite often don't go back to it. Perhaps they were on to personal leadership, yeah, which is great, but not necessarily leadership in that sense. So, in a story arc which is written by somebody, and therefore he needs to continue to read, Harry Potter does well, but in real life, I'm not too sure if that's how it plays out. And what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. My belief is that most people who thrust into leadership um, have a skill deficit. Leadership is a set of skills, much like anything else. And if those aren't inculcated in one, then there's a bit of a crisis. Now, I do believe there's truth to the whole Harry Potter quotation, insofar as I believe that the best leaders are people who want leadership for the right reasons.
Yes.
Right? Which is that they want to lead better, they want better outcomes, they want a better life for their teams. They can see the lacuna, and they can see how to fill it. The distant side of that same thing, in my mind, is that if one wants leadership because one can see all the posturing and manipulation and leveraging and pushing around that one can do, then clearly that person's trying to get into leadership for all the wrong reasons.
Power for the sake of.
So power for the sake of power,
Right.
because exactly right. Power for the sake of power is noxious. Whereas power because you think you can do a better job than is currently being done is excellent. And of course, it comes with, even if you want power for the right reasons, and I must hasten to say this, there's a price to pay.
Yes.
I remember, both my corporate career and as an entrepreneur, it's definitely given me my share of blood pressure and white hairs and premature white hair and all of that. But it also taught me absolutely malleable lessons. Shyam, so I do believe that if you do leadership the right way, there's perhaps a pain that you feel on behalf of the people that you lead, which you can't afford to express fully, and you carry it inside you, and that perhaps is the price that you pay.
Yeah, that's the leadership tax.
That's the leadership.
Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah. Yeah?
Yeah.
That's been actually wonderful. And I'm going to just lead out with something that I read about a Gen Z study, and that I think underpills your point, which is well, there's a 2025 study about Gen Zs and maybe late millennials.
Is this the Deloitte?
Yeah. Yeah. 94% of them are saying, I don't want leadership as a primary goal. Leadership responsibility is a primary goal. And if you look at the reason for that, a lot of what you said, right, which is that there is a sense of you give 500% of your time, energy, effort, missed birthdays, health, and all of that, and pick up maybe, I don't know, a much too close friendship with alcohol or something. And then what you get for it is a 15% increase at the end of the year, and maybe you're laid on by the time of 45, right? And so they're saying, why would I sign up for that? And
It's not all gloom and doom.
it's not. But and again, this is something that you said, which is, so they're saying that's not the path I want to take. There is a different path, and I'm going to go looking for it. And that's something again that people like us who logged out of the straight paths resonate with. And what we'll talk about next is gleanings from that.
So Monica and I thought that we could present leadership, because we often talk about it like this, as the intersection set of three things, all right? Which is skills, beliefs, and circumstances. Skills we can work on. Beliefs, where inappropriate, we can change. It's hard work. You need to go back to mental wiring and change those beliefs, but it can be essential work. Circumstances are largely what we find ourselves in. So maybe the way to look at it now is to look at skills that we have and beliefs that we have, and look at what we want to keep and what we want to trash. Keep or can, in your pithy phrase.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel about not intervening because I want to give my team agency.
Like so many other things, a great thing up to a point. But there is an inflection point where that becomes a problem. And I think as a leader, you have to ask yourself this question: am I not intervening because I'm genuinely giving agency, or because I'm scared of what the fallout of said intervention is going to look like? Am I going to hurt somebody's feelings? Am I going to be uneasy with the conversation? Are they going to get up and leave? Am I going to demotivate them? These are all beliefs that we carry, right? And so, not intervening, let me say it like this, right? If you have two axes, and you have the axis on the one hand of ownership, and the axis on the other hand of complexity, as the person takes more ownership on the one axis, and they also build up the complexity of the task that they're embarked on, that's when you dial back on the intervention. But in the early stages, you absolutely do want to be intervening. And there's a difference between micromanagement, which is a terrible thing, and, milestones, being available. Those are all good text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to say something about that?
No, and that cuts to the heart of feedback, right? It's essential. You too much of it, it's like a plant. Too much water and you drown it. Too little in it,
Absolutely.
and it dries out, right? And so finding out, and again, different people inside of your team with possibly the same designation, level of experience, who will have different needs, and that's because they are coming from different beliefs, right, and different skills, and therefore treating each one of them individually and having your own sort of map as to saying what is my method of giving feedback, right? And there's consistency built in there. They know when I'm coming towards them and saying, let's have a conversation, I want to talk to you about how you're doing. They know what to expect. They know it's not a time to be scared, and they know that they'll probably walk away feeling more equipped, with more tools, with more hope. That's a great feedback session.
Absolutely. Actually, the one thing you said, I realize, is such a stumbling block for so many managers, which is there is this belief that everyone should be treated the same. Everybody should be treated with the same fairness. Yes, absolutely. But do you treat everybody the same? No, because as you said, where people come from and where they find themselves are different person to person. So actually treating them all the same would be unfair to sound, right? And too much for some people and too little for some people. Really. Okay, good.
Yeah. The other one, and so quite often ideas like I'm giving more agency or I'm coming from a place of compassion, which are good ideals to hope for, get in the way of good feedback, right? And extending that, giving difficult messages and delaying giving difficult messages, because I'm thinking that I'm coming from a place of empathy, and so I'm delaying tough messages that do need to be given.
There's a great model that I saw for this, right? And something that I've used in coaching. Again, x-axis and a y-axis, right? And on the x-axis, you have time. So time along the x-axis. On the y-axis, you have impact. So low impact going up to high impact. And what you really have is a L-shaped curve. So you don't give the hard message for a while, and for some period of time, that doesn't really change the impact. At some point, the impact kicks up, right? And that really is, to your point, that not giving a hard message.
Yeah.
In the short term, you're going to say, hey, you know what, it looks like we did okay, but it's very likely to blow up in your face over time.
Yeah, there's a small window in which you can do that, and you lose the window, and then yeah. The next one, protecting people from business realities.
Ooh. Well,
is that kindness?
No, absolutely not. Some of the worst followers I've seen have been when team members don't know what's actually happening, that, the market's going to tank, that function is no longer relevant. And one fine day, they find themselves being asked to go. And they don't just think they know that they've been doing a good job. It's deeply unfair.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a can.
Yes.
What I would say is what we need to protect people from is sometimes the visceral harshness of the feedback that you might have got from your leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the intent needs to come through, not necessarily the verbiage, certainly not the harshness.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're really the speed breaker on that.
100%.
And
You're the coarse grain filter.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So then let's look at the opposite. So if that's what's masquerading in my mind as kindness, possibly as an up and coming leader, then what does kindness in leadership look like?
Oh, that's such a great question. And so many answers to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think the one everyone's going to understand is empathy, because it's easy to understand. But I think as a leader, there's a degree of what I would call functional empathy that you need, which is like you can't afford to, be dragged through all your team members' emotional highs and lows. But you do need to have a feeling for what they're going through. So you need to run a filter for yourself. So empathy is one axis. The other axis of kindness would be being honest with what's actually going on, right? Is your function going to be relevant in 6 months or a year from now? How are you actually doing, right? So that when somebody's annual sort of focal discussions happen, they're not taken by surprise.
Right.
I always think if someone's taken by surprise, I as a manager have done something wrong. I haven't spoken to them enough during the year, so that so honesty is extremely important. And honesty, not brutal honesty, right? My problem with that term brutal honesty is people tend to index on the brutal. I'm thinking of an ex-boss of mine who I would call Boris, who didn't have honesty but was really brutal. The skip manager of mine from like 3 decades ago. Worst manager I've ever had. I'm calling him Boris because he was like that Frankenstein monster in my head. Right? He didn't know what he was saying, but his job was to, in his head, cut you down to size. So that's like the opposite of kindness.
That's deep unkindness. That shows up as bully.
Yeah. What does this kindness look like, though, to get back to your fundamental question? An awareness of people's personal circumstances.
Yeah. So the idea that as a leader you make judgment calls, right? So, and that's one of the things I was thinking about, because when you're putting policies together for an organization, that's a broad instrument. And then you tell leaders that you take a personal judgment call on the basis of what that person's circumstances are.
Right, absolutely. The old saw that rules are meant for the loose guidance of wise people and the implicit obedience of fools, or something on those lines. Absolutely, because a policy is a blunt instrument. Excellent. What else?
So like you said, I think honesty, and at the same time also saying, what do I see, what realistically do I see you doing in the future? For me, a great example of kindness was with, say, you and Riaz, when he said he's going to leave, and at a time when, it was critical to the business. But for you to say, I see that this is what you think is good for you, go with my blessings, right? And what can I do to set you up? Is it a personal loss for you as the owner of that business and for the business? Absolutely. But, is it good for that person? And therefore saying...
Such a great example, and thank you for reminding me of that. Which, at a broader level, translates in my mind to this. You have somebody who's contributing to your team, but could do better somewhere else. Right? Having the largeness of heart, old-fashioned as that sounds, let them go and say, go forth and fly. Because it's also, in many ways, it's a small world.
Yeah.
And those relationships that you've set up because of trust and kindness today often pay back in the long term. If they do, excellent. If they don't, you've let loose some good into the world.
And you've got somebody wishing you well. What's the price of that?
Absolutely.
Right.
It's crazy. So, So be aware, when people's growth is in your hands, that has to be, you're juggling the organization in good with the person's good. And, the organization will recover,
Yeah.
is what I've always found.
Right.
You think somebody is invaluable, 6 months later, you found somebody and the train is chugging along just fine.
Yeah.
More often than not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Delegating.
Absolutely key. Because firstly, it's what gets in the way of delegation usually is two things. It's skills and beliefs all over again, right? The skills are because we don't really think about how to delegate. And again, if I were to quote that model that I use all the time, right, which is complexity of skill on the one axis and ownership on the other, as we see people scaling up both, you know that you can delegate more and with more assurance.
Yeah.
In the early stages, you delegate, but with a weather eye open on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Also, delegation is about you very largely. It's not just about building skills in the other person, for which it's critical. But if I don't delegate as a manager, I'm going to be swamped by conflicting pulls on my time and attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. To add to that, don't delegate difficulties. And this is something I've seen happen recently, right? In the last few years, this is too complicated for me. I don't know how to deal with it. You sort it out, right? You
That's not delegation, that's abdication.
That's abdication, exactly. But just because I'm using the word delegation, I'm delegating this to you and I'm expecting you to take care of it. A great example for me is organizations en masse will be like, you, 22-year-old, figure out our AI strategy. I've heard it in just this calendar year.
Oh, if I was a
5
22-year-old, I
times.
would be going,
Yeah.
AI, get it.
Yes. Surprisingly, those chaps are seemingly happy, and it's sold to them as you're the right people to do this and so on, and they might well be, but it's a difficulty. You don't know. Only after they give you whatever they give you, you're like yes or no to that. And honestly, I think that's bad thing.
I think that's
That's laziness.
Yeah, because if nothing else, while they might be more familiar with the AI tool itself, they don't have too much visibility into the history of the organization, where the organization wants to go, policy, business realities. So any delegation like this has to be very clearly inside the bounds of here's what we need. This is how I would do it, right? Here's what we need. Can you tell me more about the tools and what we can, on what they can do? So you bring in that sort of functional knowledge, I bring in the organizational knowledge, and we bring the two together. Otherwise, it becomes abdication.
Yeah.
That's do you know this game we used to play as kids called, what was it called, hot potato? Was it? Where you stood in a circle,
Yeah, throw the hot potato in.
right? So whoever lands with the
Yeah.
hot potato and the music stops is the sun.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
And that's a version of that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what do you have next?
Listening.
%, keep. In fact, when I teach skills like negotiation, which you would think of as a very hard-edged skill, the biggest tool that you can deploy in a successful negotiation, surprisingly enough, is active listening. Right? And one of the gurus of negotiation, William Urey, who used to work for the US government and then went into private practice, co-founded the Harvard School of Negotiation. He said that listening is the cheapest and easiest concession to make in a negotiation. And I have found this to be true.
Very nice. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you cut to the heart of what we mean by listening. And in my experience, I've found that, these words are taken out of context. If it's kindness, or whether it's compassion, whether it's delegation, or whether it's listening. If by listening, all I mean is I'm doing this. Tell me more.
With that judgy look.
With that look. And how do you feel about it? I'm not a therapist, right? It doesn't matter to me how the other person feels about it. It should be about what the person is saying and
Also what they're not saying.
and what they're not saying, yeah? And that's also listening. Yeah, but if I'm being silent and looking at the other person for 30 minutes and saying, but I listened.
Deadpan face.
It's a deadpan face and say, but I listened, I'm listening so hard.
Listening is also mirroring. right? So show that you picked up the emotion, acknowledge it, right? Paraphrase. All this goes into
Yeah.
it goes into active listening.
Yeah.
So yeah, listening is such a critical skill. So few people do it well. I'm going to say sort of bonus tip on this is while listening, do two things. Okay, one is really listen deeply and don't be formulating your own responses as the other person speaking, because then you're not listening. What you're trying to do is you're trying to rebut in real time. That's number one. Number two, and this might sound like a contradiction of my previous point, is listen to your own signals, right? So, for example, if I'm listening to the other party in a hard negotiation, and I can feel myself start to perspire, right? I can feel my heart rate go up. I can feel my shoulders clench. That's listening to myself and saying, okay, my body is throwing out signals that I am under stress. And that's what I mean by listen to yourself.
Yeah.
So know that anything you might say in response is a response to the stress that you're feeling. Acknowledge it and it's easier to put it away. Don't acknowledge it and you will be working or you will be responding from that stress.
Then the overwhelm takes over,
takes
right? And so many people that I talk to will say, I got anxious, and as somebody who knows what that means, I know that the way to cut it down is by acknowledging it and saying what's happening in my body, right? So that listening to yourself skill, and I didn't think of it as listening to yourself, but that's exactly what it is.
It is.
And that's a wonderful way to reset things for yourself as well. And
I am going to say that listening is not an intuitive skill. So it needs practice. The temptation is to rebut.
yeah,
The temptation is to say yes, but, right? But the only time the other person is going to be willing to listen to you is if you listen to them.
yeah.
With any negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking of if there was a collective noun for people who listen well, I'm gonna say Navgati, largely because of, I was thinking while you were talking, and can I think of examples of people who listen well, and suddenly like
I'm going to say pretty much everybody I know inside of Navgati is a brilliant
right, and 8 faces just came at me like that, and I was like, oh, that's like a group of people who really listen well. Yeah. And I remember even like small things, right? So I remember, uh, like you said, Sunita kind of very often look at what you're not saying and catch that and say, "Speedy, but," yeah. And I'm like, whoa, that was powerful. Yeah. So yeah.
It's probably one of the first people I saw doing that.
Yeah.
And now, pretty much everybody inside Navgati is really, really good at that skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, enough gushing about Navgati. Let's move on.
Yeah. Consistency. Sorry, before we jump into this, I have to say, at some point I said I'd like to be a little more consistent, and you said, why you're not cake batter?
I might have said that.
And that was a joke, but and it was outside of the joke. I think you do need good cake batter for good cake, and also consistency.
Absolutely. Consistency is definitely a keep. Consistency does not mean the same face, the same tools, the same attitude all the time. Consistency just means that if Monica is my manager and I go to her with a problem, I largely know what her approach will be, right? And I think there's consistency of action and consistency of thought, and consistency of thought leads to consistency of action.
Action, yeah. And quite often when you say consistency, it sounds unglamorous, but
Oh man,
I present to you Arvind Krishna. Right? That man would go into every Monday with the same 8 things, and that was so safe, right? You knew what to expect, and that meant you have the platform to really jump.
what questions are coming at me? So I'm prepared.
I have never in any of my performance conversations in TFL been surprised. I remember people used to get prepared for that conversation, come in jumping up and down with excitement. That for me is gold standard of consistency. You know the questions you're going to be asked, right? So, and I mean, he would do that, and with his like shiny bald head bobbing all over the place in the office, and I say this with deep affection.
I am not a party to this lady's bold kid shame.
It's not shame.
Actually, sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember him. Okay, you know what?
Oh, we need to not go there.
But we need to leave that bit in. Who knows?
Okay, leave that bit in. So like I was saying, it's possible to make that be cool as well, right? And like I said, he'd go in two conversations, say the same thing repeatedly, and there was not just safety, there was a sense of, appreciation for that consistent thought based on consistent beliefs that you would see in his interactions with you.
Can I point out a very simple example of consistency? You have an exercise program for the week. Okay? And I present you two situations. One is you say, oh, I get up at 6:30 and now I need to think about, making myself a cup of coffee, freshening up, putting out my exercise clothes, and then thinking about, oh, does the car have gas? And, should I put gas on the way and heading out? That's like the disorganized side, right? So there's great willpower, but there's not much consistency of action. There's no preparation. On the other hand, you have somebody like me, because I don't think I have great willpower, or what masquerades as willpower for me is honestly just organization.
Yeah.
Which is my exercise togs are set out the previous night. Shoes, socks, shorts, whatever it is. My water is set out. If I'm bicycling, my bicycling helmet, whatever. All that stuff is set out. And so the next morning, it's actually harder for me not to exercise.
Yeah.
Just
It's all looking at
staring me in the face.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the joy of consistency, right? Which is, it takes over the role of willpower. Systems are better than willpower 10 days out of 10.
Absolutely.
Right? I think we labored the point sufficiently. So what do you have next?
Conflict. So it isn't a simple keep or can, but I'm going to ask you, where do you think what's good to keep inside of conflict, what's good to can? Raising your voice at people, aggression.
Patrick Lencioni has this very nice model, which I'm fairly sure you're familiar with, right? Which is that if you have conflict on a continuum from 0 to 10, let's say 0 to 5 is the intellectual conflict, which is where I disagree with you at an intellectual level. And you and I disagree with you even about things like what should we be talking about during the podcast. So we have a lot of intellectual conflict, right? And that's absolutely fine. That's what leads to better ideas. That's what leads to better systems. That's what leads to new developments. That's absolutely great. And there's so many great TED Talks, in fact. There's this one on this lady who figured out that X-rays were leading to a lot of infantile deaths in the UK, right? Now, why am I talking about this in the context of conflict? Because her partner in the study that she did was this statistician. And their role, really, in many ways, was to disagree. His role was to actually look at the data that she was gathering and see whether there's enough rigor being applied to the data for it to be published as a valid study. Right? So that's intellectual conflict. Interpersonal conflict is when, Monica and I disagree, and I say, you're an IDIoT. That becomes...
Never have I heard that.
We're going to blank that out. Of course you never heard it, right? That's interpersonal. The problem is that it's very easy to step over the boundary between intellectual and interpersonal conflict. And therefore, there needs to be one person, typically the person with whom the power vests, who has a very clear idea of a boundary being crossed and says, okay, now, hold on, this is getting too personal. Let's bring it back to the idea that we're talking about. So, what do I think about conflict? Essential, but has to be ring-fenced.
Right. Yeah. So things like raising your voice at someone, not a good idea. Attacking someone or being aggressive, again, not a good idea. There are better ways to do it. raising your voice saying, I'm doing this to protect someone in a work context, I still think there's better ways to approach something like that. And therefore, having a clear sense of, like you said, what that ring fencing means is probably a good idea. And so, again, not a clear keep or can, but in the optics of what leadership looks like versus presence, if that's your spectrum.
I will always index on presence.
Yeah.
Because presence is, again, the confluence of gravitas, communication, and appearance. And I think my problem with optics is that outliers tend to have a hard time with it. So, what did optics used to look like, right? If I think of a certain generation of Hindi movies, it was this dude with, forget the plain speak, zero musculature legs. Sorry, I have a problem with that, right?
No.
I'm wearing these white tennis shorts and a white tennis sweater, coming in airily swinging his tennis racket, or the chauffeur behind him carrying his briefcase and waving out to, various
Team members who say, good morning, sir.
in that squeaky voice.
In that squeaky voice.
Oh God, right? So it's moved from that to today the March tea wearing pet bro.
Correct. Or let's not forget the Patagonia vest.
Have I told you how I hate that Patagonia vests have been appropriated by us?
100%.
Have I told you this?
You know who else hates it? Patagonia.
Which restored my respect for Patagonia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do you need to wear a Patagonia vest when you're a PE bro? I'm sorry, why?
Also, I've seen some in the wild in Bangalore. Like down jacket in Bangalore because...
All right, in
Makes sense.
38 day.
Makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? Leadership comes in all shapes and sizes. You could, height doesn't matter. Skin color doesn't matter. As long as you're well put together, what you wear doesn't matter. In the sense that when you're smartly put together, it influences the other person's impression of you. How you're put together matters. Do you need to be cookie cutter? Hell no.
Yeah. Yeah, find your own style if you can.
If you can.
But yeah, possibly other elements of presence, therefore.
Yeah.
Right? Gravitas, for example.
Absolutely. Though gravitas and communication matter a lot more than
Yeah.
appearance.
Appearance. Yeah.
And when it comes to appearance, we're going to say, do it. Come on. Clean clothes, ironed.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
That's about, yeah, all in.
If I have to signify leadership presence because I want to be a peacock and my way of flashing my tail feathers is to wear a Patagonia vest, Patagonia vest. You're doing something wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so we're going to close this
Okay.
by talking about some communication crimes.
I have a question for you. Do you think I went a little overboard about Patagonia vests? You can say this. You can be honest. The audience will appreciate your honesty.
What's the question?
Do you think I went overboard about
Never.
vests? Okay.
Not even 1 bit.
All right.
And also Patagonia, if you want to sponsor us. I mean, somebody who's like a...
I've bought Patagonia stuff for
And gone up mountains.
with Patagonia.
Yeah, not into AC offices. So, yeah.
I think I spent more years out of AC offices than in.
Then in at this point, yeah. Speaks well of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Here we are, staring down, short finals into landing, as it were. And I think you said that you wanted to end with a section on communication crimes. What do you mean by that?
If I say be strategic, is that a crime?
Hell yes.
Yeah, so what makes be strategic a crime?
So specific enough. What does it mean?
Yeah.
What does strategy even mean in that particular case?
Yeah.
Usually when somebody says something like that, usually is they haven't to forget what they're talking about, right?
Right?
So, okay, can I say this? The problem with a lot of the communication time that we're going to quickly talk about is that they're incredibly generic, and some of them have been weaponized. So I think of these, these catchphrases as being sort of, in some cases, weaponized jargon, and in some cases, weaponized therapeutics.
Yeah.
So maybe we just talk through a few of them and.
So under weaponized therapeutics,
Yeah.
psychological safety.
Look, is it important to have coercitors? But a lack of understanding about what that means can just mean that even the most important feedback can be weaponized, and the person could say, I don't feel psychologically safe, because you're receiving a message that's tough. That's not the same thing as being in a psychologically unsafe.
Unsafe place, yeah.
Psychological safety does not preclude tough messages.
Yeah. Yeah. And all it means is, as a leader, I've created space for my team members to fail without dire consequences, provided the business supports that.
And the intent was good.
And the intent was good.
If the mistake was, the sixth in a series where you weren't paying attention or you were being lazy, then there's probably no consequences.
100%. Yeah. Uncharted waters? You know how many uncharted waters we have on the planet at the moment. So,
Like the states of Hormuz.
like that one, yes.
Yeah, very chartered actually. Again, I mean, it sounds good,
Yeah.
but what does it mean?
Yeah.
Look, here's the thing, okay? I think you and I might see this differently. I don't think there's anything at all wrong in using a catchphrase as long as you then proceed to elaborate.
Right.
But if you're just going to use a catchphrase and then, that's, it ends there and the person can't ask follow-up questions, that in my mind is
That's weaponization, like you said. That's tricking them into a situation. But I told you it was uncharted waters. So it's for you to go and be Captain Cook is a bit harsh.
Yeah. And also to add on to that, what ends up happening is, in a situation, the other person feels foolish.
Right. To ask questions.
Ask questions, right? So using a catchphrase is all fine and dandy. Are you leaving enough psychological safety, to quote back to the earlier point, where they can say, what do you mean by uncharted waters?
Yeah.
Uncharted waters.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Great. So if you say uncharted waters and don't follow up, then your omega will be taken away from you. That's the punishment for the crime. Okay. Seriously. To close, I was thinking that if we have to summarize, yeah, I'm going to say be the leader that you wish you had.
Love it. I like
Right?
it.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple. I wish we had time to talk about these people,
Yeah.
but can I just mention a couple of names?
Absolutely.
I think the leaders that I really learned the most from. Okay, this is, I think for me, my golden period for learning from other people is between 2004 and 2009 or so. Sriram Srinivasan, Kanchan Pant, you guys are rock stars. You might not know this, but I just learned so much from you, gentlemen, just by watching you day to day, watching the respect you treated other people with, the high standards you held people to, the humor that you brought into tough situations, the fact that you were willing to get into the trenches and, learn with us, the boundaries that you set up. Wonderful, wonderful, Daddy. So these were, I think for me, I actually think that these are the guys who, although they have no clue that they did it, gave me the cojones to go out and say, let's be an entrepreneur. Let's do this. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a very long sort of diatribe that I embarked on.
No, but also valuable. Also valuable. I think both in terms of calling out names of people and saying, this is the legacy that I carry, is important. And yeah, and I have to say the same thing, which is my sense of personal leadership really comes from the various people who have created spaces of safety and growth for me. Entirely too many to name. And that just tells me just how fortunate I am, right off the bat. Like there's just so many. I've had more good leaders and good bosses than not.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But the ones I have packed a punch.
Yeah. Right. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, wonderful. I think I loved your line, which is be the leader you wish you had.